And we will start with roll call.
Senator Cooper,
Here.
Senator Landon,
Here.
Representative Ottman,
Here.
Representative Provenza,
Here.
Co-Chairman Williams,
Excused.
Chairman Kriegel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Before we get started, just wanted to take a moment and thank everybody that participated in the tour yesterday. Thanks for the organizers, all of our partners that showed up. It was a great tour, a great day. We got to see a lot of country, got to see a lot of great projects, and it's really one of the joys of being on this committee is getting to see parts of Wyoming and places that we would never otherwise venture off the beaten path. So thank you very much for everyone that helped make that possible. We'll get started this morning with the director of the trust. If Mr. Budd, if you could, Director Budd, if you could come on up and give us an update.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Bob Budd, the Executive Director, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust. I'll keep this pretty brief. I don't have a whole lot of things, but I want to leave plenty of time for you to have questions if you do. Obviously, one thing that just to think about coming down the road, the large project bill, we will have a large project bill. We've got a couple that were deferred from this spring. One in particular, Representative Ottman, you'll be interested in, which is all of the forestry work up out of Du Bois. And so that's going to be about a probably $6 to $10 million project before it's done. And the board loves the project, but it's big enough, it's going to have to come to you. The reason I bring it up here is just to remind everybody that in even numbered years, you will have to meet early in December because this committee ceases to exist on the first day of January. So in order to get that large project bill processed, we'll need to meet, and it may be as much as a day or two after. So I will start working with Talise on the draft bill probably before we even meet, having a pretty good idea where we are. And we normally have done that in Cheyenne, mostly virtual. I don't know, Representative Provenza has come over for that occasionally. It's up to you how you want to do it. But just put that on your radar that we do need to meet in December so that we can get that done. Otherwise, we're out a year. So with that, I just to give you a little bit of a highlight of where we are in 2026. And I'll tell you, you got the highlight yesterday. You can see what we do. You can see how much passion there is out in the country for the work that's done. And more than anything, I think what you got to see were results. When you stand on those ridge tops that we did and you can look at a totally intact ecosystem and realize that everything that was there centuries ago is still there. And as Tara Miller said, you know, I don't think we ought to have anything go extinct. We don't know what we might need. That's humbling and it's inspiring. And I guess that's what I think we do is we inspire. And certainly this year has not been an exception. We had a near record number of applications this spring, 55 applications in 20 counties. We did 50 site visits in 19 counties in 6 weeks, put 10,000 miles on a pickup in the month of May alone, getting out and looking at those. And they were very representative of what you saw yesterday. A lot of river work, a lot of invasive work. That's the kind of thing that really is getting people inspired at this point. The things that still seem to be the big attractants where we get the most applications, river work. There's a lot to do and you got a chance to see some of that, but realize you're looking at 1,500 feet of river there and realize how big that river is. Downstream, there's another 1,500 and downstream, there's another 1,500. So we're hitting the crucial points first and then you continue on. And it's important to realize that's not, we're not armoring these rivers. We're not making them into canals. We're not doing what historically was done with the Mississippi and other rivers. What we're doing is allowing the river to work like it wants to. So when you kick that powerful center back into the middle of the river, it scours out. That creates fish habitat. That keeps the river from tearing the banks out, When you do that, it also allows that river to access its floodplain. That creates your wetlands, maintains your sponge in the ground that we talked about, which is so crucial over in this part of the world because of the Colorado River issues. Wetlands, those conjunctive with rivers a lot of the time, but other times just independent wetlands. Some those you saw down on Cottonwood, trumpeter swan habitat, those kind of things. And they don't have to be a big deal, as Dave Kimball and others told you. You know, maybe 80,000 here, 100,000 there. But you start putting those together. And as I said yesterday, when I started this project and going back further when I was a young man, we thought trumpeter swans were going to be extinct. We thought they were going to be an endangered species, and most of them were all in Teton County, probably all sitting on Flat Creek right next to town. Since then, with all of these swan ponds that have been built, particularly in this Green River Flyway, you've got birds now clear into Utah. You have birds on the other side of the wind. So it's really a testament to what can be done if you just do it. Conservation easements remain very popular. Landowners are concerned about losing the agricultural potential, and that's probably the biggest driver there. You got to hear that from Tara yesterday. And I think that's a pretty common theme among those who are interested in that. And then invasive species. And I would say that's not just cheatgrass, medusa head, and ventonata. Those are the ones that grab all the headlines. But if you look at Platte County as an example, you've got an issue there between cheatgrass being a fine fuel that will carry fire, and then you've got invasive conifers that if that fire gets into the crowns, those fires will go for miles and miles and miles. That's a little of what we ran into last year, 2 years ago in the northeast corner. That's what they're worried about on this fire that you all watched yesterday. It did jump the line into the dark timber they didn't want it to get into when the wind shift yesterday. We'll see where that goes, but that becomes a priority. And so the healthy forest piece of this is a big piece, and that's one we're working on in Fremont County particular, on the Bighorns, and then in the Black Hills. And I think I'm going to recommend next year to whoever this committee is that we actually do healthy forests, and we'll go to the Black Hills next year for the tour. That said, clearly the legislature saw the importance of the fire prevention, the recovery stuff. We've got, of the $50 million that was awarded in 2025, that is all gone. That's all been allocated. We had another $40 million this year. Half of that is already allocated. The remainder will probably all be allocated by the time we meet in December. So people are on it. There are counties that have done, as Julie talked to you yesterday about how they built that collaborative and went, it's not my county, it's not NIMBY anymore. It's suddenly us, all of us in this area. That's happening statewide. We've got a great effort now down in the southeast corner, Tri-County, which would be Albany, Platte, and Goshen. And they are now attacking that invasive factor. So you're seeing that, but it's also Russian olive. It's also tamarisk. There are numerous species that we need to pay attention to. So with that, let me wrap up by just saying, I think there are a handful of things that we're going to look at in the next year that probably are going to be a little different twist on the normal things that you've all seen. The four that I would highlight are the whole drought, fire, and invasive complex. We're not done with that. I think 2 or 3 years ago, I was asked by Joint Appropriations, how much is it going to take to get ahead of this? And I gave them a number of $200 million. Well, we started with 50. We got another 40. So we're halfway to where I thought it would be 3 years ago. And I think that Forrester Norris and others will tell you that those numbers are probably low. But we've got to stay on it. If we don't, the minute you stop, you regress, and then you can't come back. And my friends in Nevada, Oregon, Idaho will tell you that. Secondly, I think water conservation is going to be a priority. It always has been, but I don't think we've ever seen the level of drought that we've been seeing in the last few years. We have not seen that as regionally as what we've seen in the last few years. And certainly the Colorado River crisis, if you will, is highlighting that. But we have the same kind of issues on the Platte. We have the same kind of issues on the Tongue. We have the same kind of issues on the Wind River and the Bighorn. And so us looking upstream, what are we doing to keep that water in the ground? What are we doing to get that water out of the stream and onto the floodplain and let these systems act ecologically the way they're designed? That will be a high priority. And there's a good chance I may be back to the legislature asking for supplemental funding to address some of those issues, but I think that you're going to see that be a collaborative effort again between different agencies. Thirdly, ag land loss in this state is, in some counties, is astronomical. If we do go to the Black Hills next year, you'll see it firsthand. But you can see it outside of Pinedale. You could see it on the as we traveled around Big Piney. We're losing ag land, and we're losing opportunity to keep young people in the state. We're losing opportunity. I just happened to notice the other day when we were down at the Wind River Brewing Company, the building across the street is now a shop for outdoor gear and everything, which is great. Do you know what it was for years and years? It was Harrower's Tractor Shop. That was a local implement dealer and mechanic who fixed equipment. And if you think, again, Representative Ottman, how many of those there were in Riverton, we're losing opportunity for a lot of adjunct enterprises when we lose ag land. So I think that's going to be a focus. Certainly it's already happening in the Bighorn Basin, and Mr. Fulton can tell you about what's happening in his backyard at Powell. That's going to have to be a priority, or we're going to chop this up to where you can't farm the stuff that still is arable, but you can't move equipment around in it. So something to think about. And finally, funding challenges across the board. We're very fortunate in this state to have the trust. I go to other states and they say we can't do anything that you do because we don't have that mechanism. And you heard that repeatedly yesterday. But we thought 20 years ago, 200 million was an aspirational figure. Well, we're finally at 200 million. With inflation, that probably should be 500 million. And I think that we need to start thinking in the long term about how do we build this program to where it can continue to keep up with inflation. Now, the new model, the funding model, which is the endowment model, is going to help with that as long as the earnings are good. But I don't think it's going to catch up enough each year to get us where we need to be. And Senator, you and I have talked about this several times. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I thank you again for a great tour yesterday. There's nothing like doing one in a landscape that you're intimately familiar with, where you grew up, you knew every rock and every bush, and it's just fantastic to be able to show that and share that and let people see how special this state is and why it's so important that we keep it that way. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director. Committee, any questions? Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Budd, thank you for a great day yesterday. All of the landowners were great. It was so wonderful to hear all the different entities that are working together and that they are working together and not separately. So that was exciting. I'd really like to know how to be able to get a helicopter ride. That would be nice. So anyway, if you could just take a moment and explain to me what you were meaning and saying by increasing the floodplain. I don't quite understand how that works.
Sure.
And I mean, like the Nile, I don't know. And the other thing was in Fremont, which forests are we looking at? Because I know there's a lot of BLM and things there.
Sure.
So thank you.
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, let me answer your last question first. The forest, the Shoshone out of Du Bois is very, very aggressive and progressive. And so they're doing incredible work. They've done stuff up Long Creek. You're familiar with Long Creek. They've done a lot of thinning, a lot of removal. The beauty.
If just a quick take on it, I know there's a small lumber mill now in Pavilion once again, which is excellent. But what are they doing with the timber? Is it all going for sales on site, or is it being moved out? And then Also, are they doing prescriptive burns with the slash piles? Do you know?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, depending on how they do on the prescription, if there are slash piles, they are being burned. There are a lot of cases, what they do is lop and scatter, which is they cut that smaller stuff and leave it on the ground to rot. Clearly adding that carbon back into the system is a good thing, but it also prevents elk from getting in there and eating all of your new aspen shoots. So it makes it a little tougher for them and for cows and for other things. And that's really well. There are probably 30 different old stream channels. If you walked across that you'll cross where that's coursed this way, then gone this way. And so you'll walk along and fall down on your face because you found the stream channel, found an old beaver dam. But that's what I mean by that. And that's so critical to maintaining these systems when you look at these wide valleys. If you don't have that, they narrow down and then they dry up and you desertify the edges and you lose biodiversity, you lose a lot of ag value. But yeah, I'd be happy to share them with you. There are numerous studies, I participated in some, as to how much economic gain there is by adding 100 yards of floodplain. It's astronomical numbers of how much feed you add. Yeah, so that's what I'm.
Any additional questions for the director? Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Director Budd. It's always a lot of fun to have a conversation with you. And we were up on Warm Springs not long ago, by the way, and I thought about you because I looked up through some of that work that they're doing, and here comes the aspen. The aspen are popping up, and so I smiled a little bit and thought about the work that's going on. So I wanted to circle back, Director, to the invasive species piece. We've got something in my neck of the woods down along the Platte River from those reservoirs all the way down through that has come about really in the past decade or so, but it's starting to bloom out, and it's becoming really pretty concerning, and that's the Russian olive infestation. And it's proliferating at an alarming pace around those reservoirs and down through that blue ribbon trout stretch that we all know about. What are your thoughts in that regard? And I wondered if we wouldn't want to consider that being a piece of what we try to do in the future to mitigate some of that disaster that's occurring.
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Land, I want to phone a friend to get up here to help me with this answer. Pidge, if you'll come up here, I'd appreciate it. We talked about this in the Bighorn Basin this year when we were doing site visits. And Pidge has been on the board long enough to go back to when we started doing that work in the Bighorn Basin. It is a vexing issue in part because we put the olives there. They were planted in shelter belts and everywhere else because it was believed that they were great pheasant food, that the deer liked them and that kind of thing. Well, fast forward 60, 80 years, one olive dropping a few seeds and pheasants eating it is one thing. When they grow so densely that you can't even put water through them, that's a different issue. And it is I'd say a critical issue in particular. We don't have that issue on this side of the state very much. On the southern end, you're picking it up. It's more salt cedar. But when you talk the Bighorn, you talk the Platte, we're talking about millions of gallons of water that are being vaporized every day. And so as we continue to try to meet our water obligations, we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing with all of that olive? And Pidge, I think you might want to just kind of look at it from your eyes in the Bighorn Basin your entire life and seeing what's happened there. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Well, when I first got in the.
Mr. Fulton.
And
Introduce yourself.
And if you don't mind, just introduce yourself for the record. So we all know who you are, but not everyone does.
Okay, Pidge Fulton, Wyoming Natural Resource Trust Board. When I first got on the board, it was a pretty big push in the Bighorn Basin to clean up the Russian olive and restore the water, And there was a big push and there was some criticism about it, you know, because some of the hunters and some of the residents thought we were destroying habitat by taking that off there. If you just look at the Bighorn River, you know, when it comes out of the canyon and that stretch between there and Worland was solid. I mean, just like you're talking about on the Platte. And a little bit at a time, we got people to buy in and work on it. And most of that river now is cleaned up. And one neighbor would do it. The next neighbor would see it and they'd say, I want in. And so it progressed on itself. We haven't had that big a push lately in our area. We need to have. We still have a problem in around Burlington and that area, and some work that we have already done. We've had Russian olive come back, and this isn't along a river. It's a vegetative area, cow pasture type situation. We have chased that a little bit. Bob has and I have, to make sure we get that cleaned up. You know, contractually it should have been. Right around Powell, we don't have as big a problem. The lower Shoshone River is invasive. Our weed and pest jumped on that, what, 10 years ago?
20 almost.
And cleaned up a lot of it. I had the opportunity to float it with my son, and there's still some work to be done there. We just have to have those partners that come to us for the help. You know, basically the Bighorn Basin, we've gotten ahead of it. And that's what we need to do down there.
Follow up?
Really appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. And a few years ago when I was on this committee, I remember, I forget what drainage it was, but it was pretty startling. That removal that took place in the Bighorn Basin recreated, literally, the creek started running again. So what we're talking about, as the director pointed out, this is the usage of millions of gallons of water that we owe to a state to the east of us and that we owe to our people to use here in our state before it goes. So the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know, we may want to move this up on the radar screen and revisit the issue of you know, junipers, and there's a couple other species, but for us, it's the Russian olives.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Director.
Senator Landon. That was a little bit couched, is it on? That was couched a little bit in my previous comment about invasives being something we need to continue on. The issue there, I think, is there's one is awareness. The other is cost, and it is not cheap to do these kind of treatments, particularly as you get into those dense forests of olive and others, and then you've got to look at retreatment. And I think we've got a handle on doing that, but it is, I think, something that we need to look at. The other part that a lot of times I think people, we have short memories. We don't remember what it was 30 years, 40 years ago. A lot of those streams were cottonwoods, willow, other deciduous plants. When you look at what those harbor as far as dependent species, bird numbers alone are astronomically different between what will live in a cottonwood gallery forest and what will live in a monoculture of Russian olive. The same is true with deer, with small mammals. And then you start talking about migration routes and the ability for animals to move freely. Well, we all know where they like to go. They go up and down the rivers, right? Well, if they can't go up and down the rivers, some of them just quit going. And so it's a much bigger ecological problem than just the water piece or just the drying up of the landscape piece. It's a much bigger thing. And I think if we will look at it that way and kind of even go back and look at old historic photos and say, wow, this stream used to be cottonwoods. There was a picnic spot here. There was this there. That's what we need to, I think, aspire to get back to.
So one final follow-up, Mr. Chairman. Director, I guess as a member of this committee, I would await, whatever directive would come from our board. And by the way, it was great to spend time with our board members yesterday. But, I think it's going to take some resources, and maybe we can think about that. And if it's the flavor of the board and this committee, we can maybe push forward a little bit of additional funding that we can begin to address some of this. I just think it's gotten way bigger faster than we thought was going to happen on that stretch of the Platte River in
Yeah.
Corona County. So,
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, I'd be happy to follow up with that. I think one of the things that we could do, you could do collectively with my board, is pull back out the cheatgrass stuff is in there. The Medusa head and vent knot is in there. Invasive conifers, it's all in there. The only thing that didn't happen is we didn't act on the recommendations to fund it adequately. And I think that that's something, even just a recommendation from you as a select committee to re-evaluate that and address it would probably be very timely and very worthwhile.
Additional follow-up? Any other questions for the director, Mr. Fulton? All right, I got a couple,
Okay.
Director. One housekeeping matter. When does the board meet? Just so we can kind of, all of us up here can be thinking about if we're a couple days or less than a week after that. Do you guys know when your meeting is?
It'd be the second Tuesday in December. Do you know what, Hillary, do you know what day? Huh? So it'll be the 13th.
Okay.
Which would give us time, even that Friday, or it's before Christmas, we could get this meeting in.
All right. Thank you, Director. Representative Ottman says the second Tuesday is the 8th.
The 8th would be correct. That's even better.
Yes. So we'll have plenty of time.
Yep.
We can make that happen. All right. Thank you. And then the next question I had was sort of in regards to the fire restoration, recovery, et cetera. And this might fall in line with the discussion you were just having with the good senator, about Russian olives. But I think we need to also have that conversation about how much additional funding we might recommend to appropriations, or whether it's a standalone bill that some of us work on together. It might be outside the scope of the committee per se, but it's something I think we could work on. But I think we could use your advice as we move forward, maybe a little bit on what that looks like. And I think by December, actually, we'll have a better idea. I mean, there's a lot of time there's a lot of fire season between now and the beginning of December. And it could even, depending on when we start getting snow, it could last longer than that. I mean, just based on how dry the state is.
Right.
Our part of the world is crazy dry. So anyways, if we could just get your help on that, and I don't necessarily need you to answer anything today, but just be thinking about that for all of us so that when we roll into session, we have a plan, because I think that's going to require our attention. So thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, let me at least respond to that. I did put in a supplemental budget request for 50 million to pick up the 50 that we didn't get last time. It seems to be a recurring theme with me. I know you've seen this before, but and that by the time we get to budget hearings and visit with the governor about it, we'll have a pretty firm handle on where we are as far as the recovery that's been done. One thing I can tell you, and I think Julie Kraft told you this yesterday, the results are absolutely astounding, and you've seen it in your own backyard. There isn't any cheatgrass. It's coming back in natives. It's coming back gangbusters. And so we're actively treating. I just made a payment before we came down here the other day to Campbell County. They're almost completely caught up. Same with house draw fire. So we'll have a pretty good idea of where we are with those. And as you say, we'll know what we have as far as fires this year. Hopefully not that many. The only good thing about a drought is there's nothing to burn. So sometimes you dodge a bullet there. But that's something that we anticipate. But at this point, I did put that in the supplemental at 50 million. So just so you're aware that that's there.
Thank you, Director. Any additional comment or questions? Senator?
Mr. Chairman, I did, maybe we can give some thought to both of those major topics that we've kind of touched on. And by the end of the meeting, if you desire a motion, maybe we can consider that. And it probably would come in the form of encouraging the chairman of our committee to work with the director to come up with recommendations on those two fronts.
I think that would be a great idea.
If I may, final comment, I sometimes don't do as good a job of this as I wish I did, but I want to highlight my staff and board. We are an agency of two. We handle as much funding and projects as several agencies that have a lot more people, particularly if they're federal. And the reason we can do that is the board. I have 9 members on that board from the judicial districts. They do a lot of the work, and they are a phenomenal group of people. As you saw yesterday, they're intelligent, they're passionate, and they're fun to be with. And so when you get a project done, it's because they have been vested in it. They know it. They've gone inside and out. They've looked at the budget. They've looked at the permitting. They've looked at the biology. We could not do what we do without those 9 board members. And so I just want to publicly one more time tell you how important they are and how much I appreciate them.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I would say the committee echoes your sentiments 100%. We sure enjoy working with them as well as from the legislative point of view. They make our job super easy. We know that when a project comes to us, it has been vetted, and because they're invested, it's in their backyards, it's in their communities, and they want those projects to succeed. And so that's a stamp of approval on our end. So we appreciate them very much as well. Thank you. All right. I think the next item on our agenda is the University of Wyoming Conservation Tools. So I believe we have Dr. Merkel and Rick, if you want to, Mr. King, if you want to come on up too, you'll be up here and ready to go. All right, floor is yours. Introduce yourself and give
Thank
the
you.
presentation.
Yeah.
And we're glad you're here, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Crago, members of the board. Thank you very much for allowing this time. Thanks also to Mr. Budd for inviting us and kind of facilitating this. And then yesterday was incredible, inspiring. I mean, what you guys are doing or what you're contributing to is big. And you talked about world renown. I mean, this is a special place, and what you guys are doing is keeping it that way for us living in Wyoming, but other people too, to think, wow, Wyoming is this place. That's kind of how it was and how it's beautiful, and the things are working there. So that's inspiring to me, and it's really cool to see this group kind of doing these things in the way you're doing it. So it's really cool. Okay, so let me introduce myself, then Rick can introduce himself. I am going to do most of the talking, but Rick's going to be my sidekick here. So I'm Jared Merkel. I'm a professor at the University of Wyoming, and I'm also affiliated with some other groups. And one of those that I think is really important for you all to know about is I am the science advisor for the Migratory Big Game Initiative, which is USDA's initiative to try to help support big game conservation, similar to the sage grouse initiative you've heard in the past. This is for big game now. So I'm a science advisor for that. And so you'll see a lot of the work that I'm going to be telling you about today is kind of under that hat, as well as my university hat.
Yeah, Chairman Crago, members of the committee, my name's Rick King. It's good to see you. It was wonderful to have the chance to visit with you all yesterday and participate in that tour. And I echo Jared's comments. It was a wonderful day, and it's great to see the amazing work. I spent about 26 years working for the Wyoming Game and Fish, retired as the wildlife chief about a year and a half or so ago. And after retirement, I realized that I still have this tremendous passion for the state and for the wildlife resources and the landscapes that we have. And so over the course of my career, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Merkel. And I know that Dr. Merkel has this shared passion for landscape conservation and doing good work and doing it in the right way. And so it just seemed like a natural fit for me to slide into Jared's shop. And so he's been wonderful for me to step in there and work with his crew. I kind of joke that most of his crew is half my age with twice my brain power, but it's been a good place and a good fit for us to share our combined passion and expertise. So thank you.
Mr. King, thank you for being here. We've had the opportunity to work together before when you were still at Game and Fish, and I always enjoyed that. So thank you for your service to the state, and thank you for your continued service to the people of Wyoming. It's much appreciated. Doctor.
Well, thanks. And yeah, as many of you know, Rick, it's pretty special to have him working with me, and it's given me a whole new perspective on conservation and the work we're doing and partnerships. And yeah, thanks so much. And as I talk, please, Rick, jump in if you feel like I'm missing something. Okay, so a couple things I want to do today. One is tell you a little bit about myself. I also want you to realize that my team and the University of Wyoming can play a little different role, more of a supportive role, more of a technical service role with you all, not just to do some science and hand it over. I want to work with you and partner with you, and you're going to see one of the things that I'm going to show you today takes the things that you're doing and brings it out in a tool that we can celebrate the work in a broader sense. I'm also not asking for any funding at all, so put yourself at ease for that. This is just a partnership that Bob Budd and us are all kind of trying to show you guys what we can do together and kind of raise the level of your work to a bit higher level. So about me, I mentioned a couple things about what I do, but I also want to say that I hunt, I fish, but most importantly, I care about really big open kind of landscapes that are, when we were standing on the hill multiple times a day, even though we had the smoke, that's pretty cool to see that. And I also have come over my years working in conservation, I've come to realize, especially in Wyoming, that working lands, range land, livestock operations are the kinds of things that are most compatible with wildlife conservation. And if we can do things that benefit both of those, this is just win-win. And everything we saw yesterday is win-win for those types of land uses. And so I'm passionate about that, and everything we do is thinking about that from that standpoint. Okay, so let's dig in here. I want to give you guys just a high level in thinking about what my philosophy is and how I'm maybe a little different researcher than you've maybe heard about in the past. Basically, I want to tell you the story of how I think about this through Jill Randall, who works for Wyoming Game and Fish. We met her yesterday. I know there was lots of discussion about how amazing Jill is. Well, when I think about what I do in a research sense, I try my best to sit with Jill as much as possible and talk to her. And when I hear something from Jill that's a bottleneck, some informational need, I take that information and then I start and go to my team. I talk to Rick. I have all these amazing researchers, data scientists, and we come up with ideas of ways to help with those bottlenecks and those needs. And then before we get too far, I go right back and I sit down with Jill and I start talking to her about what it might look like and how to do it. And then we build something and that refines and repeats. And that's kind of how we build things within my lab. And a lot of what we're trying to do is build things that are useful, but we're also trying to build science and tools that everybody can get on board with at the end. As you all know, sometimes the scientists can get a little go off the rails a little bit. And then when it comes to the end, it's like, what did we do here? My point is to build that trust so that when we kind of build a product or we have a tool that not only you guys could use, the board could use, but maybe the people that are applying for funding for you guys can use, we all trust it, we all believe in it, and we want it to work and help us. So that's kind of how I think through my research. Next thing I want to tell you is a little bit more about that USDA Migratory Big Game Initiative and that I'm a science advisor for that. And the biggest thing that I think is really important here is this was launched in 2022. And it was basically our governor, Governor Gordon, our director of Wyoming Game and Fish, and then the secretary of the Department of Agriculture sitting down together and talking about the uniqueness of Wyoming, of how we partner, how we do things. And honestly, if it wasn't for the work that this trust does and the workflow of people on the ground, you all, and the people making the decisions like the board, this may not have happened. So you have kind of facilitated and laying the groundwork for this partnership and this big game initiative that started in Wyoming right here. And what's cool is this initiative has brought over 50 million extra dollars with respect to NRCS, Farm Service Agency, to Wyoming to benefit our ranchers and to benefit our producers and wildlife. And so it's a cool system to be in, and that's moving forward. And this is what part of my job is to help do science, create tools that makes this most efficient. So we putting the money in the right place, the best places, the same system that you guys are working in with Bob and the board. But I'm also here to do science that helps us assess the outcomes. That makes sense? So when you do some work, sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out, like, is this working? Is this not working? And so I'm here to do that as well. And so next slide, I want to just give you an example of where we can play a role in all this before I talk about my tools. So y'all have heard of this because you funded some of this, but remember when the bad winter happened 3 years ago, there was a bunch of pronghorn collared in the red desert, and they all tried to escape that snow, and they bounced around, and many of them perished. It was a sad story. But when we brought the data in and you plotted on a map, you could see that there were fences and roads that these animals bumped into. And what it did is it gave us a formula for where to do our work that's going to be the most beneficial. And I'm sure members of the board for sure have heard this story, but one of the biggest things is there was a big chunk of about 16 square miles that no pronghorn ever entered because of woven wire fence. And that's now a cattle operation. It's not a sheep operation anymore. And a bunch of folks got together, Wildlife Fund, you all funded some of it, and 23 miles of fence were fixed there. And this was a big celebration. This happened last summer. Kudos to everybody for getting that together and getting that done. What my team did to step in to help is we took some of our funding and we put collars out there again this winter to document and to describe and quantify what has happened to that landscape now that you all have fixed those fences. And what's super cool is we put those collars out in January. Within a month, there were already 4 or 5 pronghorn using that habitat that was 100% excluded during that bad winter. And so that's a pretty easy win right there to just show that map that, hey, we fixed these fences and that's opening up habitat for pronghorn. And remember our discussions yesterday about connectivity and what Bob said of a place that these animals can access all the habitats is a place that we're going to have more animals. So that's exactly what we're showing here, and that's where my team can come in. And so as we collect some more data in the after component of this study, there's even more fences being fixed in this landscape, and we can tell that story through some science and data of how important that work has been. So that's what we can do from my team's perspective. Okay, now I want to tell you a little bit about our tools that we're building within my lab. There's lots of tools. It's overwhelming. I'm only going to talk to you about 2 of them today that I think are most relevant to the work that you do. But before I dive into that, I want to tell you a little bit about why we build these tools and what's our kind of goals behind them. And so the first thing is that there's a gap between research and what happens on the ground. That's why you have Bob Budd, who can kind of be in between that. He kind of hits the ground thinking about what's happening with data, et cetera, and then brings that to you guys. One of our goals is with our tools is to take that research and make it more easily accessible to people on the ground, to managers, to conservation folks, and decision makers like yourself. The next thing is, as you all know, we're getting barraged by data. There's more and more data available. It's just almost overwhelming how to deal with that. One of our goals is to kind of break those barriers down and make it simpler. And so you can sift through that messiness and trust that my lab, my university, we're bringing you the best data that's possible that you can use to make your decisions. And then we're also just trying to empower you all, field personnel, to be able to utilize that data to make the best decisions possible. And then the last thing is just improving efficiency. If we can make decisions and put our funding in the best places possible, we're going to have a bigger return on investment down the road. And so we're kind of, all those things are really driving the tools that we're building. Okay, so the first one I want to tell you about is a tool called our conservation tracker. And we were talking about maybe doing a live showing of this, but I think I'm just going to show you a few of the highlights with slides here. But the idea with this system is that we are going to take everything from every project that you've done is in this tool. Every project that NRCS has done through their EQIP program, their habitat program, all the conservation easements are in here. All the grassland CRP work is in here. It's a tool where all that work can be in one place. That's unheard of. Usually they're scattered around and it's hard to see it. But the idea is that we can, one, celebrate all the work that's being done in Wyoming together in one place and look at the conservation, look at the actions that have been done. And then two, it can help us start to think through where are the places are we making huge progress? Where are the places that maybe we need to do a little more work at, et cetera. And so let me kind of show you some of the details. So when you look at the counties right there, you can see they're colored by different colors. And you can take this tool right off the bat and look at what percent of the private property is either under conservation easement or under a grassland CRP lease. So it's protected for agricultural purposes. And you can see Teton County has the highest percentage of those properties, but Sublet is a close following of that with, as we heard yesterday, it's like 26% of the private lands will be in agricultural production forever. And that's really neat to just kind of know that. So you can see that across the state. Sublet and Teton are one of the biggest counties, but other counties are also doing these lease programs where there's actually funding go to the rancher to keep from subdividing and keeping it in agricultural production, and that's all in there as well. We can also look at this in different ways. You can look at the Department of Interior's 3362 program, where all the priority areas for those, we can plot those on the map and look at where these things are happening, et cetera, et cetera. You can also plot the work that you've done on the map. You can plot the work that, again, at USDA has done. But one thing that we do that's really important in this system is we preserve the integrity of the private landowner. So you can see it at the big scale, but if you zoom in, you can't look any deeper than that. Does that make sense? So we can celebrate the conservation at the big scale without identifying a private landowner that's making the decision that they want to make on their own land. So that's a huge thing about this tool. Okay, keep going. Oh, I mentioned, so you can look at with every county or every polygon in this, you can look at what percent of private lands are under conservation easement or whatever. But you can also look at what percent of producers are just working with us in any capacity. This says 25% in Sublette County are working with us on anything from a habitat program to an easement or whatever. And this is only properties that are above 5 acres. If you look at properties that are above 40 acres, over a third of the landowners in Sublette County have done something related to conservation. That's pretty cool. So we can track that in this and we can see that on the landscape. The other thing you can track is the conservation progress over time, and you can calculate things like how many acres per year are we actually conserving. But it can also tell you how many acres per year are being developed or are changing as well. And so those are right next to each other within this tool. And so that helps make decisions like, should we put our effort in this area or that area, depending on where the threats are, where we're changing landscapes are happening the biggest. Hit it one more time. So you can't quite see all these, but this section in blue and in green here is basically describing the work that WWNRT has done and that EQIP, USDA's habitat program, has done. And so we can literally count up the miles of fence, the acres of cheatgrass, the acres or the miles of stream that we've worked on. And we can see that across Wyoming, and we can compare and kind of celebrate that work and see the investment that we've done. So that's this tool. One last thing I want to tell you is that this can, again, help us celebrate what we've done, but you can also zoom in to a watershed and get a feel for what is the momentum or the progress in that area. We talked a little bit about when one rancher does something, the neighbor sometimes does that. That came up many times yesterday. This is going to help us understand, are we going to put our effort into a place that's ecologically important, but also is the cultural will there? Do we already have momentum going in the right direction? So we can do that here. Okay, the second tool I want to talk to you about, you probably will never use it yourselves, but this is a tool that's going to help us prioritize our fence work. As we all know, and I know the board has talked about this, fence work is very expensive. And we heard about it yesterday that we're not just going to do every fence on the landscape. We have to prioritize. And what our system here does is helps with that prioritization. And so basically what we do here is we take fence data that's collected by our field partners like Jill Randall and her team. And then we take the GPS collar data that the scientists and Wyoming Game and Fish have collected, and we bring those two data sets together and we let the animals tell us where are the problem fences. And what's neat about this is it brings it all into one place. Up in the upper left there, we have an app. So multiple people from Wyoming Game and Fish are using this app in the field to collect data on fences. And then when they collar their animals, they also go into here and basically provides us a system where we all can agree and all can see where are the problem fences, and we can then prioritize from that. So let me show you an example here. So this is up by Cody here. This is the all the fences that are just kind of southeast of Cody. And what we see here is in yellow and red. So red are fences where pronghorn that have been collared out there have come close to a fence, but had trouble crossing it. And the number, the heat map here says that in those really red spots, that means 72 times a pronghorn tried to cross that fence and didn't make it across. And so when you look at that heat map, you can just a quick look, you can be like, okay, there's about 6 spots on that map that probably only add up to maybe 10 miles that are the worst spots and that we can prioritize. So that's what this map is going to provide us. And the other thing that's cool is you can click on this, you can click on the details of each fence if the data are there and know what you're getting into. So we can know what the cost is going to be. Are we changing is this a high fence deer fence, or is this something that we can is it already a 4-wire fence that we can just alter slightly? Does that make sense? Like we can understand what's there on the landscape and such that we can build a better budget and build a better prioritization.
Quick question.
Yeah, of course.
So I assume after the fact, we'll be able to see results immediately. I mean, you'll be able to report back to whomever, whether it's us or Game and Fish or yourselves. Hey, we fixed that, and within days we could see a difference. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that's definitely right. Especially if we have collared animals out there and they tell us. That isn't always the case. But the idea with what you're saying, though, is we could draw a circle in this area and say, 80% of this landscape is permeable. But when we fix those fences, we brought that up to 90% permeable. And so that's the kind of thing we can get instantly. But if we actually have collars on the landscape, absolutely, we can bring that in to the next step. Okay, go to the next little thing here. So this gets pretty detailed too. You can actually tell which side of the fence is where the animals are having their issues with crossing it. And what that can help us with is identifying how much habitat on the other side of the fence are we maybe lost, or are we going to restore if we do the work? And so that's the neat thing about this. And I don't know, I haven't seen the proposal that you got for those fences in the Red Desert, but there were places where it was clear as day. It's like the pronghorn never went in here. But there's other places where there's movement data on either side of the fence and it looks like it's okay fence. But what Wyoming Game and Fish told me is even in that Red Desert, the map of the data helps. But if you dig in, you can start to see, well, there's animals on both sides of this fence, but none of them are crossing it. Does that make sense? And so this tool can help illuminate these things that are a little hard to see at first glance. Okay. Let's go to the last slide here. And so those are the two tools I wanted to kind of demonstrate to you today and kind of get you thinking about my work. And I hope that it's really clear to you that our tools are kind of varied in their approach and what they're trying to do, but they're all around the same philosophy of celebrating the work, prioritizing, and then assessing the outcomes of the work that we're doing. They're not here to make the decisions for you, but to serve up that information and the data we have in the best way possible so that you can work with your field personnel, your partners, and make the best decision possible. And then last, I hope it just helps us celebrate the success of the work that we're doing, is bringing these data sets together and showing them on the map. So thank you very much. And Rick, please jump in if you want to add a couple things. Otherwise, we're happy to take questions.
I see Senator Cooper has his hand up, so we might go to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to that previous slide on that you had enlarged on the Cody area there, with the fence issue on one side, I believe that was a highway fence. Are we working with YDOT to eliminate some of these issues? And can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit? Also up on the 1620 on the Grable Highway, I see that it was kind of highlighted in red. Can we discuss that a little bit?
Doctor?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Great question. And yes, Wyoming Game and Fish and YDOT are working very closely in that area right now. I don't know if you guys have funded anything, but there has already been some small modifications to fences that are being improved. There is an overpass in the works in that area. So YDOT and Game and Fish are definitely working in that area. Astute eye to see that. And you're right. That spot that I was showing on the map, those pronghorn are typically migrating up into the Carter Mountain area. And so that's when they bump into that fence that I zoomed into, is when they're moving southwest up in elevation. When they're coming back down, they go in different areas. But yes, this is a good thing. And I'm sure Bob might know more about this if you all are kind of connected with some of that work that's being done there.
You can always count on Senator Cooper to catch the important details.
Yes, that's great.
He's always on it. Any follow-up, Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just a comment on that. We've got so many wildlife strikes up there, with automobiles. Myself participating in that on a regular basis. We need to really think a lot about, an overpass is a great idea, but that's a long ways down the road. We've got to be able to balance that fence and keep the wildlife off the highway as much as we can. But I'm just not sure what the right answer is there. I'd sure listen to any ideas they had.
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out that Senator Cooper, some of us went out to the junction last night, and just north of there, Senator Cooper put a lot of that fence along the highway up when he was a little younger than he is now. And I think that's kind of cool. But lots of the miles of fence north of the Daniel Junction, Senator, you spent some time out there.
I was actually quite a lot younger then, but yeah, we built that fence. It's a 3-lane fence. If you'll notice, there's a stock drive pretty much on the east side of that highway all the way through there. But there was a lot of that fence that was lay down fence too. The woven wire was assembled with turnbuckles at different intervals, and you could loosen the turnbuckles and lay that woven wire down so that the antelope could migrate through there. It was specifically designed for that.
Thank you, Senators, for the history on that. It's always good to hear that. And we were even thinking about conservation way back then, Senator Cooper, like a couple years ago when you were a younger man. Go ahead, Doctor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Cooper, great question as well. And I'm sure everybody that's working that area would totally agree with you that we got to do something now, even though an overpass and a bigger thing might be down the road. I believe the vision with what's happening right now is that some of the problems is that when pronghorn are migrating, they kind of bundle up around the road and, they kind of pile up. And then when they actually do start crossing, now you have lots of animals on the road and it becomes a bit of a mess. And so they're strategically changing some spots in that fence so that you don't get that pile up of animals and that bigger issue. And I think that's just the first step that they're working towards. And hopefully that makes a difference at this level, or at least in the very short term. But I think that's the vision of how they're approaching it at this moment, with a broader vision of down the road, doing a bigger thing with a safe passage, either under, over, etc.
Just one comment on all the research and the tools, and then we're going to get to Mr. King. But I think it'll be super interesting as you start, bringing some of this research out and having conversations with your landowners on the ground, because typically they know where the animals are crossing to. It'll be interesting to see how that verifies or cross checks against what they think or what they know. And then also, if once you start having those conversations, they might be able to point to some other places where maybe the uncollared animals are going. And I think if we know there as landowners, if Wyoming landowners know there's a place to go and report some of that and to make a difference, they will. We just have to start down that road, and because it's something we just typically haven't always done, but there's an opportunity there to really move that conversation and get, I think, results that it'll snowball for sure. Mr. King, you want to close this out?
Chairman Craig.
Sorry, I think there's a question over here. Apologize, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the conservation tracker, which is very impressive, and it looks like you can kind of layer those with these other tools. One of the things that keeps me up at night and bothers me as I'm driving across the state is the fear of some of these ranches not staying as ranches, and then we lose a lot of this conservation space. And so in looking at the conservation tracker, it looks like it does a really good job of looking at what we have. I'm wondering how I can best use this tool to understand the gap of the people that want to do conservation easements that need resources, so that we can grab some of these lands to ensure that we have them for future generations. Is there a way I can use these tools together to find what are the hot spots that we need to try to put more emphasis on, and how much does the state need to kind of like think about what resources we need to provide to ensure that we can get those conservation easements before they become the boogeyman of the subdivision?
Doctor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And Representative presents a great point, great question. And I want to answer it by saying that we highly respect private landowners, anonymity, so they're not in the forefront. And so one thing we really try to do is balance that respect with also doing our best with return on investment and trying to figure out where to invest our funding, our money in the best place. And so with that, the best we can do with maps and data, we can only go so far. And I think what I would suggest on that front is to really lean on your partners, like the land trusts, like TNC, like Wyoming Game and Fish, that know the landowners, know the ones that are interested and maybe not interested. Once you get that kind of information and you know the cultural landscape, then you can come back to our map and say, wow, this is a really important spot. Let's work with those landowners first and maybe work with these ones second. And I think that's going to be your best tactic of kind of mixing together the data and the maps with the people on the ground that either do or do not want to engage at the level that they're ready to engage in. Does that help? Yeah.
I feared there was no shortcut to the, there wasn't a special map for me, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. There could be a shortcut, but I don't think we would all get on the board together and be a partner in this work if we went that route. And so I would still lean on those partners that know the ranchers firsthand as your first stop with that.
Any other questions? Any follow-up? All right, Mr. King.
Yeah, Chairman Crago, members of the committee, thank you again for the time today. And really, Dr. Merkel and I wanted to be efficient with your time. And so Dr. Merkel covered everything that we wanted to highlight. Again, we just would like to thank you for your time and the opportunity to be here and highlight the University of Wyoming and the opportunity that we have there to be a partner in this great work. And again, I think Wyoming, you all have heard it so many times, but I think it's worth reiterating that the process that Wyoming goes through to tackle conservation efforts is really a role model for others in terms of using science, local knowledge, and partnerships to accomplish great work. And so thank you for the wonderful work that you do in that process. Thanks.
Questions, comments? All right. Thank you both. Thanks for presenting to us. That's super interesting, and look forward to maybe, I would ask you to come back in a year from now and fill us in on what it looks like. I'll be super excited to see that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Any public comment on this topic or the last one, since I just skipped over that and apologize for that. But if anybody has anything to chime in on this topic or the next one. Any board members, i.e. chairman, want to say anything? All righty. Next topic. And I don't think we have anybody online, correct, Heather? All right, thank you. Next topic is the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund update. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both.
Good morning.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the committee, and thanks for the opportunity to present on behalf of the Wyoming Office of Outdoor Recreation. I'm Mark Tesoro. I'm the manager of the office, and it's great to be back here in Pinedale. I know Senator Landa just stepped out, and I was going to give a kudos to him. I know that this is his old stomping ground and is my old stomping ground as well, as I was the publisher of the two newspapers here, the Sublette Examiner and the Pinedale Roundup from 2013 until 2023. So it's always great to be here in Pinedale, and it's beautiful in the summer. I won't take terribly long, but I'd like to give a rundown on what our office has been up to in the past year and leave plenty of time for discussion for Chairman Riemann to talk about the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund. Outdoor recreation has been the topic of many discussions, not just locally and regionally, but nationally in the past year. Many of those discussions have been regarding outdoor recreation on public land, on private land, and also on state-owned land. And there's also been a lot of discussions about outdoor recreation and the benefits of health in the nation. Things like heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, hypertension. Outdoor recreation can be the answer to some of those And I think there's been a lot of discussions from the national level down to the state level and to the local level as well. And of course, the benefits of outdoor recreation on mental health, getting kids off screens, out of the basement, out into the outside, is beneficial for populations throughout the country. On the national level, outdoor recreation is a $1.3 trillion economic driver for the U.S. economy, supplying 5.2 million jobs and 2.4% of the U.S. GDP. And here in Wyoming, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, or the BEA, $1.4 billion from outdoor recreation goes into the Wyoming economy, 4.5% of Wyoming's GDP, and about 16,500 jobs. That's 800 jobs up from this same report last year in the outdoor recreation space. Our small team of 6 in the Outdoor Rec office has been very busy in this past year. We had the Outdoor Recreation Summit that took place in Saratoga in early May. That was a fantastic event. We were able to get about 190 folks there from across the state. Those are NGOs, stakeholders, agencies, elected officials, business owners, all in the same place talking about outdoor recreation. And special thanks to Representative Sandy Newsom, Senator Wendy Schuler, Representative Andrew Byron, and Chairman Riemann, who sat on that legislative panel in Saratoga. Right after that, a couple weeks after that, we had the Mountain West Trails Conference, which happened in Rock Springs. This is the second trails conference of this type that's taken place. The first one took place in Vernal, Utah in 2024. That event was kind of the culmination of the Utah Office of Outdoor Recreation working for several years, having a big trails conference, and they said, why don't we try and have something that could be done for the Intermountain West? So we volunteered to have that in Rock Springs this year, and next year, in 2 years from now, it looks like it will take place in Nevada. So this will bounce around the West in the foreseeable future into different places. The Mountain West Trails Conference, we had about 300 people there in Rock Springs, and a day and a half of field trips, keynote speakers, breakout sessions, and a lot of good work that just talked all about trails for our states. We had a lot of stakeholders from places like departments of transportations, municipalities, bike organizations, NGOs, all talking about what they're doing in their states, and we could showcase what we're doing here in Wyoming. So just a fantastic event. And if you do remember, that was right when there was that big late spring snowstorm. We had several folks that weren't even able to make it. We had one of our board members from our trust fund that was coming from Casper and stuck for 11 hours and ended up turning around going back just because the weather was so bad. But eventually it cleared, just typical spring storm, and able to have a great conference down there in Rock Springs. Right after that, we had the 250th ride across the state. You may have seen that. This was kind of the brainchild of Senator Stacey Jones a couple years back. She said, for the 250th anniversary for the country, why don't we have across the state ride? And so the State Trails Office, Forrest Kaminga, the manager of that office, and our office worked together for about the past year in putting that plan together. Starting in Evanston on July 1st, we rode 4 days across the state. We had 35 side-by-sides and about another 10 or 15 full-size rigs that followed us across the state. We stayed in Rock Springs the first night. We stayed in Saratoga the second night, in Laramie the third night, and then on into the capital of Cheyenne on the July 4th in advance of the festivities that all happened there. So just a fantastic way to showcase all that we have in Southwest Wyoming across the state for off-road riders. And everyone was asking, when are they going to be able to do something like that again? You know, they'd like to have our office and the State Trails office put together another one of these rides. It was during the 4th of July weekend, so there were quite a few state employees that were working, and hats off to my crew and the State Trails crew for putting that ride together. But yeah, just a fantastic event. 3 weeks ago, we had the governor's shooting match and the outdoor recreation firearms expo in Casper. And that governor's shooting match, that's the 10th annual shooting match that we had there. That is put on in conjunction with the Casper Shooters Club. And the second year that they've had it sold out with over 300 competitors from across the nation competing there at that event. For the expo, we had 34 vendor booths there and a lot of great participation from the public. We did have a legislative panel at that, and we had Representative Mike Yin, Representative Alyssa Campbell, Representative Art Washut, and Natrona County Commissioner Dave North, and Representative Jamie Lean all participated in that legislative panel at the Outdoor Expo at David Street Station. Just another great way to showcase all that's being done for outdoor recreation, manufacturing, and businesses in the state in Casper. Also wanted to highlight the great work that's being done by our collaborative coordinator, which is Amy Crawford. Many of you may know of the collaboratives that we run throughout the state. We stood up 4 new collaboratives last year in Wyoming, so now we have a total of 12 collaboratives. Those collaboratives are just meetings for different members of the communities throughout the state, whether it's agencies, whether it's nonprofits, stakeholders, club members. We have those throughout the whole state, and the 4 that we stood up last year were the Lincoln Uinta Collaborative, the Teton Collaborative, the Mountain Mound Outdoor Rec Collaborative here in Sublette County, and then also the High Plains Outdoor Recreation Collaborative in Goshen, Niobrara, Platte, and Laramie counties. So now we have a total of 12 of those collaboratives that we have interacting with about 500 people throughout the state 4 times a year. And of course, our office has been very busy with the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund. As the secretary of that board, I've been to all of the meetings and was able to travel to 35 of the site visits that we had this past spring. For me personally, it's just been a highlight for me to have been on the Office of Tourism Board of Directors and see this legislation from the other side, and then have it passed, and then be in the office as the manager, and to be out on the ground looking at these projects, meeting with stakeholders, meeting with these applicants, and seeing all the passion that they have for outdoor recreation in the state and all of the potential that there is for the state. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to Bryn Hirschman, who's here. She's our grants coordinator for our office. A lot of the behind the scenes work. She's really the engine behind getting a lot of the documentation done for that trust fund this past year. So been a great help. And with that, I'd like to turn the time over to Chairman Riemann, and thank you for the committee, and stand for any questions.
Any questions, committee? All right, Jeremiah.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann, today here as the chairman of the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust, and very honored to be a part of this particular group. We gave you a slide deck. I'm not going to go through each one of those particular slides. Wanted to be able to use this as a resource for many others as well. So it does cover our mission and vision. Like Mark, I want to express my thanks to the staff. I also want to express a sincere and honest thanks to our board members. This is a really active board that's rolled up its sleeves, just like the Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust, to bring you forward a really good product. And we're going to continue to do that over the course of the years to come. We've got 9 members across the state, and you can see who's representing your county in the packet that I've provided for you. To this point, since our appointment, we have hosted 7 meetings across the state. Our most recent one was the first funding meeting, which was in Evanston, but we've been to Lander, Newcastle, Casper, Cheyenne, Riverton. We hosted that on the reservation, and Saratoga as well. Got a few more meetings planned for the remainder of this year. Getting to the meat of it and what that looked like in terms of actual projects for us. And if you're following me on slides, I'm on page 6 in terms of the information that's there. This first round of applications, we received 80 different applications representing projects in 22 of the 23 counties. Platte County is the only one where we did not receive an application, and I'll work closely with folks there to see that we ultimately do have an application from that county. We had over $10 million in requests. I think a lot of us believe that that was a depressed number for a variety of reasons, and we've got some good information to suggest that that's the case. If you go back to the ARPA grants, when those were put out, they received over $80 million in applications. Why might we have had maybe a depressed number of at least in dollar figure applications? One, I'll point out that the department ultimately did not submit any applications for this process. They didn't want to get in front of others in this first round. They did partner with some, and I do commend them for that decision. It really was helpful, but I would expect that we will see applications come from the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. We had a pretty short time frame for applications to come in. We wanted to get monies on the ground as soon as possible in this first go. And just to note, the first time that we could put monies on the ground was July 1st of this year. That's when the legislative authorization kicked in for us to do that. So we did have a short time frame. I also think, based on conversations with many, they wanted to sort of feel out how the large project process might work. And that's the $200,000 threshold we have, unlike the Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust, which is at $400,000. So I would anticipate that we'll see some larger projects come forward in the future. So I did just want to note that. Of those 80 applications, we were successful in funding at least partially 35 of the application, or let me back up. We did site visits at 35 of those 80 applications. We were able to fund or partially fund 21 projects in 15 different counties for a total of just over $1.9 million for this current fiscal year. I'll note, of those 21 projects, only 4 of them were fully funded, to give you some sense of the math we had to try and figure out to get this done. 2 of the projects are large projects, and I'll come to those here in a second. So ultimately, to some degree, we were able to fund about a quarter of the applications that we received. I'm on slide 7. I'm not going to dwell on this stuff. Quickly, just to note, though, that we did have applications from a variety of different parties, from everywhere from the state, federal, special, district, city, county, town, nonprofit. So a good cross-section of applications across the state. On slide 8, you can get a sense of what the project types were. Heavily leaning towards trail and trailhead infrastructure projects, but you'll see in there winter recreation and water are also highly invested. And then we have a myriad of other different projects that had interest in the applications. Slide 9 just shows you a little bit about the funded projects and how those ultimately fell out. And it's somewhat consistent with what you saw in terms of the overall applications. Looking at slides 10 through 12, I'll just mention a few things there. I'm really proud, and this shows up on slide 11. We have the Paposia River Country Gardens Restoration Project. That is a project that the Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust is invested in. So that is our first partnership project. And ultimately, we were able to put in $175,000 to that particular project to help restore some of the bank infrastructure of the river there. And it's a heavily used fishing spot for people. And that's why we have our investment there. I'll also give thanks to Bob for another partnership. Last night, he shuttled my son and I up to the top of Fremont Lake so we could go mountain biking. So we're keeping that partnership strong, and we'll do that into the years to come. Mr. Chairman, we have noted with an asterisk the 4 projects that we fully funded. Those are the Petrified Tree Accessible Trail in Johnson County, which is a BLM project. Really maybe a side anecdote to that one. When you get into the wildlife evaluation that we did with each of these projects, that one happens to sit in greater sage-grouse core area. And when the application or just a couple of years ago when the project was conceived, we didn't have a fire that had gone through that particular area. Well, when the application was submitted, it, of course, had the fire, which through the disturbance threshold under the Greater Sage-Grouse Core Area strategy over, which would generally say without mitigation, we couldn't do something there. And I'm very happy to say that we've been able to work with all of the applicants and others, partners in the room, to ensure that we could get that under threshold, and we felt confident with the Game and Fish that we could move forward with that particular project. Looking at others that we fully funded, Cache Creek Trailhead redesign, which is in Teton County. That's a $50,000 investment on our side. Ultimately, it will be a much larger project, but we have commitments from the local partners that they will fund that locally. We will not have to do that. So we'll support them there. Up in Campbell County, there's a multi-use trail head system just north of town called Burnt Hollow. And we put some funding in there to help them get off the ground and do their evaluations. And I already mentioned the Paposia project. That is the other of our fully funded projects. But you've got the whole list there. If you want to dig into it and have any questions, let us know. Mr. Chairman, on slide 12, that is a highlight of the 2 large projects that we are bringing to you. The first one is Belfry Bridge, boat ramp improvements. I will say it is a much larger project than boat ramp improvements. There is fishing access there. It's parking infrastructure, picnic infrastructure. And we ultimately approved a grant of $215,000. That's matched dollar for dollar by the city of Cody, and they confirmed their commitment after we approved our grant. And I will say this is also a project that the Wyoming Game and Fish Department has put considerable resources into. And so I'm excited that we're supporting that. The other large project comes out of Bighorn County. It's the Cottonwood Canyon Trails System. For the House members, you may remember this project from Dalton Banks, Representative Dalton Banks, when he had his Wheaties moment on the floor. It is an incredible project that they've envisioned for that area, and we think can be pretty transformative. It starts a trail system from an existing underutilized BLM camping ground and would provide for a network of trails that kind of lead back down towards the river and lake and towards town. We put in $300,000. I will say that's far short of what they would like to have and what ultimately is needed to fund that project. But we felt we could perhaps direct them towards the non-motorized trail system funding that you all ultimately appropriated this last year. That was an $800,000 pot of money, and we're hopeful that they're successful in pursuing that funding. But we gave our first nod towards that particular project as well. So those are our two large projects. Mr. Chairman, going to slide 14, I'll note just a few things that caused us a little bit of pause, and maybe I should suggest that we've completed our first round of funding for this year, and we've only decided to do one round of funding this year. We're going to take the fall and apply the lessons learned that we had from the first round and do some continuous improvement to our guidelines, our process, and ultimately with the goal of putting out another request for applications, perhaps at the very end of this year, but certainly at the beginning of next year. So we'll take a couple of meetings to do that. A couple of things that we struggled with as we went through this first round of applications. The first one was projects on private property. And I'll just use one example. We had a number of shooting ranges in particular that are on private property. One was out of Bighorn County that was owned by the county at one point in time, deeded back to a private group that does open it up for their high school students and others. But we were worried about public access for our investment. So we're trying to figure out what that looks like. And one thing that we did is if an applicant could show us that there was a permanent easement, recreation easement available, then that was okay for us this round. But we want to really kind of dig into that and sort it out so that we can better inform applicants if they're going to come forward with a project that might be on private property. The second one is related to what equipment might qualify as outdoor recreation or tourism infrastructure. We had a number of applications across the state. One was from the state shooting complex. They wanted side-by-sides to be able to take people out from the main parking lot to the shooting areas. We quickly decided that that one really didn't fit what is necessary for the service of an activity or an outdoor recreation activity. But we had another example is we had a request from Antelope Butte ski area for a grooming machine. It's about a $500,000 machine. That one, we might have, we had a really concrete definition, been able to say, well, you can't have, groomed downhill skiing without a grooming machine. But it felt an uncomfortable space that we were in trying to fund that when we had denied it perhaps elsewhere. So we really want to dig in and come up with a concrete definition that we feel good about and that you can feel confident in what we do with the money in granting that. So those are a couple of things that we'll be specifically working through as we go into the fall.
Mr. Raymond.
Yes.
So just clarify on that are you going to be doing that through rulemaking, through policies, through internal processes, or is that something you need the legislature to look at?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, great question. I think for now, our intent is to try and figure that out through our guidelines process. So not necessarily to the level of rules yet, although we feel we could go that direction. But I will let you know if we feel there's anything in the statutory structure that gives us pause in doing any of that. But right now, we think we can do it administratively.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to close out with just a couple of things. I'm on slide 15. Some other support we need, and I know that you may not be the vehicle to do this right now. We're looking to also engage the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee. I've talked to the House Chairman last week about that. We'll talk to the Senate Chairman here shortly. The first point is the fund is overprescribed. We have more need than we have funds available. And let me just talk about what funds we have available. Through your support, and these are figures we just got. So the trust itself now has $18.2 million in it. The income account has right around $2 million. Now, to be clear quickly, that $2 million is going right out the door. That's the $1.9 million we just funded. We've also have some administrative support, a vehicle for our secretary. So that is pretty much committed for this first part of the biennium. It is our belief that that $18.2 million will generate enough, probably north of $2 million for us to be able to fund the next 2 rounds of grants that we intend. But I just wanted to note our available funds. So that's about $2 million a year that we're putting on the ground. And I'd like for Mark to just share with you quickly what our neighboring states are putting on the ground each year.
One quick question before you do that. So what kind of matching money are we getting for our $2 million? Just rough figures based on the projects that you've described to us already.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'll get you a precise figure. It depends project to project. As I said, dollar for dollar for the Belfry Bridge project. If you look at the Cottonwood Canyon Trail system, they had put up $150,000 from the city of Lovell. A pretty impressive investment from a community like that. We decided to defer their match in hopes that they could use that $150,000 as match towards the non-motorized funding that you put forward, because you had a dollar for dollar requirement there, and we don't have necessarily a match. But I'll get you precise figures of what ours ultimately translated into. I'll close out the answer with this. In our guidelines, we looked at sort of our best attempt at finding the health of the revenues in each of the counties and prescribed suggested matches that were different for each of those. So, and I'm going off the top of my head here, but Teton County had a 50% suggested match to anything that we would put on the ground. If a project was on the reservation, we had, I believe, a 25% suggested match. So we had different scales. I think we had 4 different scales that a county and the applicants from those counties would have to try and bring forward to us, giving ourselves flexibility to do what we did with Cottonwood Trails, as I suggested to you.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, so I reached out to the other outdoor rec offices kind of in our region. Not every state has a outdoor recreation office, like, for example, Idaho doesn't, California doesn't. But the ones that I reached out to, for example, Utah, in 2026, they put $41 million on the ground for outdoor recreation infrastructure. New Mexico, $11.7 million. North Dakota, $7 million. So, I mean, our $2 million is a fantastic start, but I remember at a TRW meeting when Senator Landon said, wouldn't it be great if we could put a couple $100 million into some type of a fund for outdoor recreation? I know this is a start, and it's just a great way for us to get our foot in the door with outdoor rec projects across the state. But one of the things that many of the applicants said is that they weren't even asking necessarily for full funding. They just wanted to get some because they knew that there was such a limited amount to go around.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of other things too before.
Okay, well,
But
please
happy to
proceed.
take questions. So, Mr. Chairman, there are a few project areas that we had to also take some pause around. The first one, I will say, clearly fits within our purpose and mission, and that is boat ramp infrastructure. In particular, we received an application from the Game and Fish Department to support extension of ramps at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. An absolutely worthy project given what's going on with that particular recreational resource and the drawdown. We're at the point where if something isn't done, there will be no operational boat ramp on the Wyoming side of that lake with what's going on. And I'll leave the greater importance of that project to John Walrath, who is here from the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and I think he's got some resources for you. They put in a request for $600,000, certainly well worth us investing in. But as you can imagine, for us as a board, even if we cut that in a third, it's still a large project, which would require us to come to you. And it was our better sense that in some ways this was a project above our pay scale, if you will, given what's going on with that particular resource and even some of the other lakes that the department operates across the state. And so we do think it is something that you and the broader legislature should really take some serious thought to putting some funding and support towards boat ramp infrastructure. Otherwise, we're going to be shutting down some of our resources, and it's just the nature of those drawdowns that are there. So I'll let others jump in and share, but I wanted to point that out. There are a couple of other places where we received applications that really kind of fit outside of our scope and maybe outside of the statutory construct, but might be of importance to you, and that's why I want to bring them forward for your thought. And those are playground and municipal park infrastructure across the state. We had some really neat applications in there. There's one out of Rock Springs for an adaptive baseball field, really well thought out. They've got some great funding partners, and it could be the first of its kind in our state and allow for them to host some tournaments and others for students and children that really could benefit from outdoor recreation. So it is a place that I think that the legislature should take some thought to. And the other one was around fairgrounds. We had quite a few counties come forward with different projects that, likely are worthy. They just were a little outside of where we felt the trust had been established for. So I just point those out. Mr. Chairman, I'll just close again thanking some broader stakeholders. Of course, you've been a part of this. We've had 2 governors involved in the buildup to this. A lot of stakeholders invested time in helping us get the rules and regulations and other elements put together. The 2 tribes participated in that process. The Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust was a considerable asset to us. The board members reached out to their counterparts across the state to impart their wisdom. We had the Office of Tourism, Hospitality Coalition, and there are certainly many more that I haven't noticed, but a great thanks to all of them. And with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to take whatever questions you might have.
Thank you. Senator Landon?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I have any questions at this time. We touched on a couple things I was going to ask about, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your work and putting all that in. I think we all look forward to seeing the results and continuing to work with you, and hopefully we can grow the program. So thank you. Thank you. All right. I believe we might have someone from Game and Fish talk to us about boat ramps. Floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am John Walrath. I'm the Regional Fisheries Supervisor for Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and I'm based out of the Green River office. And thank you to Mark and Jeremiah for kind of touching on a proposal that we had submitted, thinking that Flaming Gorge Reservoir is one of the gems of the state of Wyoming and certainly attracts a lot of tourism for the whole state and certainly is important for our local economy there. So we felt like a proposal when the Recreation Tourism Trust Fund option came out this year, when we were already planning some infrastructure improvements around the gorge, we felt like it fit the framework. And at the time that we were submitting an application, and the application said that there were no limits as far as what could be asked for. It was just that anything over $200,000 would require legislative approval. So I called Bryn and we talked about that limit because I told her I was looking at projects that would cost in the millions of dollars. And she promptly told me that there would maybe be 200 million or 2 million, excuse me, in the coffers for distribution, which told me I needed to scale back what our potential original request through this process would be. So we've solely focused on boat ramp infrastructure, and that is something that the department receives funds for, and we allocate those funds across the state. And for this purpose here, I provided you guys a handout that I quickly pulled together. It kind of highlights the needs and our phased approach to try to handle what's going on Flaming Gorge Reservoir. And I will stick to my notes as best as I can, as Flaming Gorge Reservoir is rather complex with lots of partners and different policies and procedures in place for all the different partners that are working together across the reservoir. And I could talk for a long time going into the intricacies of everything there. But your handout will look like this one. The first page just talks about an overall project, all of some of the fun stats that are tied to it. The handout on the second page shows some of the pictures of the current status of those ramps just from yesterday. And then the last page is a projection from the Bureau of Reclamation as far as what our future looks like for access around Flaming Gorge Reservoir when it comes to our boating constituents. And these handouts will become good for you to reference as I go through kind of my presentation here. On the first handout is basically that overall a visual overview of the boat ramp project. The boat ramp project itself is more of a proactive investment. It's designed around maintaining access that already exists. So this is not about creating new boat ramps. This is talking about extending and or widening ramps that were built in the 60s and 70s that have been used for decades and are still very functional, but with the drawdowns that are happening, we are one, going to be losing boat ramps, and two, losing functionality and safety aspects of those boat ramps as well. So the boat ramp project, when completed, the ramp project will preserve public access to Wyoming's largest reservoir. reduce that congestion that we have already seen in 22, 23 during that one low water year we experienced, and help ensure anglers and the recreation boaters can continue accessing the reservoir during our 2027, 2028 water years. The important aspect of this project is the timing of it. On the second handout, those photographs are showing the current condition of the 4 boat ramps. So each location kind of has its own unique challenges, and these photographs illustrate what we're already operating for as far as limitations on those boat ramps, where some of those that were widened, which was the planned operational elevation of the reservoir, we're already operating the reservoir below what was originally planned for Flaming Gorge Reservoir. So that means we have reduced capacity right now. And then the photographs, excuse me, on that third handout show where we're likely to be headed. So if you turn to that third handout, and I apologize to Senator Cooper who did not receive this handout, but I can certainly share this handout with him if he's interested in receiving those. But on that third handout, you'll see that there's a section there for the current reservoir elevations, and compared to what the Bureau of Reclamation has for the most probable and the minimum probable projections for April of 2027. So just a few months away here, early next spring. And as a side note, so far in 2026, I mean, we've not received very many rain events in Southwest Wyoming. So we've actually been tracking more of that minimum probable trajectory than we have the most probable currently. So that simply, that table there just tells that story that today we have multiple boat launch opportunities, but we are already seeing some of that lost recreation ability where the Forest Service has already shut down the Anvil boat ramp. There's only 1 more foot of water over the very bottom of that boat ramp, so no trailers can launch at that site, and there's barricades on the upper end of that ramp shutting it down from public access. So that's Wyoming's furthest south boat ramp on the reservoir, which means those boaters now need to launch from further up reservoir. And then our Brennigers, Buckboard, and Firehole ramps are already losing their extra lanes to handle multi-use or boats launching 2 at a time at those ramps. And now we're down to 1 at a time. But the current reservoir elevations provide a rare opportunity for a construction window. Basically, completing these boat ramp projects while water still is remaining low allows contractors to complete a lot of the work in a more favorable condition. And if the reservoir recovers, those construction costs could increase to about 300% of what we're already planning now. So far cheaper for us to perform this kind of work while water levels are down and the land is dry than water levels coming back up to where we have to deal with putting in widening and more concrete on these ramps underneath water that is present. So we've also watched our neighboring states make significant investments in recreation infrastructure at Flaming Gorge.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? Can we go back
Absolutely.
to the timing? So give us sort of drill down on that just a little bit. I mean, what's that look like? I I understand it could rain a foot tomorrow and that's tomorrow, but what are you thinking, or because obviously we can't do anything until session anyway. So kind of give us some more information on that if you could, please.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. To answer that question, right now, the department is in our engineering designing phase, and we've already allocated funds and have contractors or an engineering firm hired to do all the design work for all 4 of our major boat ramps on the Wyoming side. That work is anticipated to be completed next spring, so April of 2026. And then the earliest that we could begin construction would be August of 2027. And our construction is kind of contingent upon having the funds available to actually be able to hire a contractor firm to go out and complete work at one of those boat ramps. And I say phased work because without our completed designs plans, we have a priority to say that the buckboard ramp will be our #1 priority. And that is mainly based on the fact that from the Bureau of Reclamation's projections, that buckboard facility will be the only one available to the public come next spring. And it will be at a reduced capacity. So expanding the availability for boaters to launch multiple boats at one time will help alleviate some of that congestion that's going to be experienced at that facility. So that's where we would put our project dollars first, is at that facility, knowing that the more funds we have means that we can also widen, extend ramps at other locations if we have the funds to do so. But we can only do it so long as water levels remain low. And right now, the Bureau of Reclamation's projections show that we have a 2027 and 2028 operation year, and that can change as it does based on our winter conditions, but it would take an enormous water year for us to gain back everything that is planned to be sent down this water year alone.
And what does one ramp cost to fix up to where it's usable? Do you have an estimate on that?
At this time, I have no exact number to provide, and that is what our engineering designs will provide us. We've done numerous boat ramps across the state, and depending on those locations and what's involved for those ramps, it's anywhere from $300,000 to $600,000 for a whole new ramp to go in. And what we're discussing is most of that groundwork is done. So we would be tagging on to what already exists. So that would make our overall price a little cheaper. But as we know, is like as inflation keeps going, our project costs also keep going up, and it gets more expensive to bring contractors on to complete that work. So we're anticipating that at least in this first phase, everything that we've allocated so far in this project will hopefully be able to cover everything at the buckboard ramp and at least get that one fully functional for the public. And then we'll see how much money we have left and try to tackle other projects, other ramps that are going to be a lot cheaper than what happens at buckboard.
Thank you. I only ask that because if we all decide to try to help you find that funding come session time, however we do that, it just would be helpful to have some engineers' estimates, even if they're not fully complete, that we could show folks, hey, this is what it's going to cost. Most of our colleagues get real nervous about round numbers and just guessing, and so and they should. So anyways, if there's any way you could help us with that, that would be prior to session, that would be super helpful. That'd be helpful for all of us. Thanks. Representative.
Thank you. And I guess follow up to that is, where does that funding need to go to the trust? Because we don't directly fund Game and Fish, correct? So where do we need to make those appropriations to help with this project?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, that's an excellent question, and one that I hope that the committee and working with our director's office could perhaps figure out a solution to that question. I myself do not have a good answer for that, but certainly encourage folks to discuss that and see if there are ways to provide such support and funding for projects like this one. Because like I said, like there are some other projects going on in other states that they're somehow able to bring in some match dollars and support infrastructure.
Are you phoning a friend Are you the friend, Mr. Reaman?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just thought I might be able to offer some thought to it, and I've thought along the lines of the Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust. There are many times where you've tasked them to look at supporting other things, whether that's the cheatgrass work that's gone on in the past. They've done sage grouse research initiatives. It is possible, given that this is bigger than just the Game and Fish Department and perhaps involves the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources, that you could fund each of them separately, or you could appropriate a portion of funding to us and direct us to try and figure that out, again, similar to the Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust. So I think it could take many forms, and that could exist for the other things that I mentioned in terms of park infrastructure or fairgrounds. If you wanted to give us that responsibility, we'll take it on, but I'm not suggesting we want to take that on, but it is a possibility.
Follow up? Thank you. Mr. Walrath?
Thanks, Jeremiah. Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate the fact that, you know, as Jeremiah mentioned, like there's a lot of infrastructure and things around the gorge, and this boat ramp project that we submitted this grant ask for is all total about $1.5 million, of which we would have about half of that already as in-kind match contributions. And that is between the department paying for the design work that's underway, of which we could have preliminary designs by this fall, and we would just have 100% designs by next spring. So we will have an idea of rough cost estimates in a few months here, but much sooner than next spring. But also, we are planning to use some of our boater access funds to also help fund this project as well. And our partners at the Forest Service are also chipping in with what they can do. And I don't have to tell you guys that like the federal side of things is very difficult right now for them to contribute a whole lot. But we're trying to be good partners with them and try to do what we can to help tackle some of these big projects that are looming out here. So all total, if we were just looking at public access infrastructure on the Wyoming side, that's about $12.5 million for the big projects that would make a big improvement as far as what the public sees for like roads, parking lots when they go and recreate at the gorge. Right now, a lot of that infrastructure is failing, large cracks in the road, parking lots that have holes in them, no lines. It's just a lot of deferred maintenance that no one really has funds to try and tackle. And that would be something I guess I would ask that is considered or kept in mind when packages are considered for funding opportunities in the future. Is several folks would like to see this done, and no one really has a great idea as far as how to go about funding these kind of projects when there's multiple partners all together. But perhaps by sitting everyone down together, we could come up with a creative solution that helps the public and maintain our public access around a place like Flaming Gorge Reservoir.
I think you have a question from Senator Landon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a dozen, but I'll hold them today. But I'm not that familiar with Flaming Gorge. I just don't get over there. It's a long ways away from where I camp out every night. So when you reference infrastructure needs and you start talking parking lots and roads and where does the state parks and cultural resources come into that? I understand there is some state park there. Is that correct? And then are those county roads? Who maintains them just in general? Because we went from a boat ramp project and now we're talking about the entire Flaming Gorge recreation area. That's a whole different ball of wax. So I'm just trying to get my arms around what you just said. So
go ahead.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Land, you're partially correct. I will say that the area around Flaming Gorge Reservoir is Forest Service. It's a national recreation area. And the NRA used to have its own pot of money when the NRA was originally established, when Flaming Gorge Reservoir was filling. There were funds there for maintenance of infrastructure and of the facilities that were around the reservoir. The NRA no longer has an operating budget. Those funds are solely within the Forest Service and then get allocated out, but the NRA no longer has its own dedicated source of funds, making it a little more challenging to compete for funds on the NRA when they're competing for Forest Service-wide needs. And then as far as who has the road maintenance and the parking lots and things, that's typically going out to the Forest Service, since that does reside on the NRA. And then a lot of the rest of the gorge is surrounded by what we call the checkerboard, or it's the difference of the BLM and grazing associations outside of that 2-mile buffer of NRA. So typically it's a county and Forest Service responsibility for maintaining and like doing snow plow removal on those roads.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments for the committee, and that I think that just touched on the problem, but it also touches on an opportunity that over these last couple of years, some of us have stumbled up against, and that is if we're going to have the responsibility passed down to the state, which I think the feds are trying to do, that's fine. But I think that what we might consider as a legislature going forward is a push to say, we're happy to take this over, but it needs to be our property. This property around these reservoirs, for it to belong to the Bureau of Rec, to the BLM, to the Forest Service, and then to not be funded, i.e. those infrastructure problems that you just told us about, that's a frustration. And it might be something that, that our congressional delegation can help with. We have a specific area or two that I can reference in my neck of the woods. The Miracle Mile, for example, I know the state could do a lot better at managing that property than what's going on around Alcova, around Flaming Gorge. So we're going to bump up against that. But Mr. Chairman, I'm sure there's things we can do in the meantime. I just wanted to have everyone be thinking about that. So thank you.
Any comment on that?
No, I would say that the infrastructure needs are great, and it is a challenge for our partners to try to meet those infrastructure needs. And I can tell you, if we talk to our Wyoming constituents, they do look at improvements made, and they see a lot of improvements being made on the Utah side of the reservoir. And that's not, I want to make clear that that's not a part of the Forest Service just choosing to put their funds on the Utah portion. It's just they are more apt to get a better value for every dollar spent on the Utah side because there's match going into that. They're able to pull in grants perhaps from their outdoor rec fund in order to maintain those roads. Every access road in Utah around the gorge is paved. On the Wyoming side, we have the road that goes into Buckboard and the road that goes into Firehole. The Anvil Road, the Brenniger Road, all that's gravel. So when they see all these projects taking place on Utah, the Wyoming constituents say, why not the Wyoming side? Like, why isn't the Forest Service able to put in new fish cleaners on the Wyoming side? How come our marinas do not have a wave attenuator on them to protect boats at a marina slip? Why does Wyoming not have a fishing pier that the public can go out and recreate on the Wyoming side? These are the kind of things that the public sees and they kind of get frustrated about. And I guess me sitting here was just trying to spur that momentum to say, yeah, there is a need and the Wyoming constituents see a difference happening. And yeah, I would love to see some kind of a solution come up to where we could be better partners as a state with our other entities, whatever that looks like, so that we can make some of these infrastructure improvements for our own constituents and then also those that are traveling in from out of state to recreate here. And then I'll just say that my original ask here today was to see about options of continuing to show support for just the boat ramp portion, knowing how convoluted it can get when we do start talking about parking lots and roads. But we as a department do foresee us, a sole part of our responsibilities as a department is maintaining access. And boat ramps for us in a fisheries standpoint is that falls solely on us to help maintain that component around Flaming Gorge. So we're going to remain committed to doing what we can for boat infrastructure around there. And I appreciate any consideration the committee has on ways to help fund this project, of which we threw out there one option of $600,000 being made available in FY28 to help match what we already have planned. Or if that wasn't possible, a two-phase approach of $300,000 in FY28 and another $300,000 in FY29. And with that, I will stop there and thank everyone for their time and consideration over this kind of complex and kind of unique situation for our neck of the woods.
Thank you for being here and for bringing this to our attention. I think it's something that's probably important to all of us. Any comments, questions? Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to clarify it in my mind with the boat ramps, okay, to extend them and to widen them and to look forward to as if we're going to have to maintain this condition or even more lower. So we want to extend them and widen them, particularly the one so that it could take additional traffic, correct?
Mr. Walrath.
Okay, follow up. And so if the water levels were to go up, if we were to be blessed and get a lot of rain, is it still advantageous to have these extensions for the future, or how is it primarily because of the conditions we're in right now?
Mr. Walrath.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, that's a very good question. And I have actually answered that question more than a few times because that is definitely something that pops into people's minds when they hear about boat ramps and you do the work and what if the water comes back. The one thing I've come up with is the upper and lower states are working on a new water management plan for the Colorado River Basin. My crystal ball is saying that whatever those negotiations end up being, the Flaming Gorge Reservoir will be a critical piece of those negotiations and will likely be facing a more variable water elevation operation than we've experienced the last 30 years, which tells us that where our extensions on existing ramps now will be more than likely the upper end of water elevations we can expect in the future. And so in our normal operations, we can expect to almost be starting there and going down. And those fluctuations could be greater than what we've experienced, which is typically about 10 to 12 foot a year. This year, we're looking at almost a total of 30 foot going out, and more will be going out next year. And it takes a long time to recover that water. 2023 was a very good year. It was not great for our wildlife populations, but it was great for Flaming Gorge Reservoir because we gained about 23 feet back in 1 year. But that was one of the wettest years we've ever experienced. In a normal year, we get about 15. So when we get 15 foot of water coming in, and 12 is going out, we gain about 3 foot back on an average water year. So any work that we can do now while the water level is low will be advantageous for us in the future because we'll be more equipped to handle these variable water elevations on the gorge while maintaining that access for the public.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to say thank you for that, because that will have to be an explanation if we decide to go on with this, that I'll need to have. And I want to say, my husband and I were able to, well, we did go through there about a month ago, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's beautiful. So thank you for all the work.
Any additional questions, comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you. Thanks for being here, and I'm sure we're going to be in touch with you as we move forward. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Any additional public comment on this topic? All righty. Any general public comment? None online still? All right. Thank you. Seeing none here. Moving on to committee directives. Committee, what is your pleasure? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we direct LSO to work with Director Budd for that December meeting so that we have a large project bill draft.
All right, we got a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Ottman. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. All right, that motion has been adopted. Any additional directives? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple, and I'll throw these out here to see what the colleagues on the committee think, but we have had a couple of things come up this morning that I think might be worthy of consideration, that we have our chairman first work with the director with regard to invasive species and maybe broadening what we might want to ask from the appropriations folks and from the governor. We talked about Russian olives. There are a couple other species that the director may want to consider, but we've kind of been focused on the grasslands, and it just feels like maybe we need to return some effort in our Bighorn Basin and our Platte River drainage and start trying to get our arms around the Russian olive issue. So that could be slightly broader than the Russian olives, for example, but that's just a suggestion that we draft a memo in that regard with the help of the director.
Any additional comment or thoughts on that from the committee? Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to go along with that, Senator, 30 years ago in Colorado on the western slope, the Russian olives were absolutely taking over all of the ditch banks and, river banks and everything that used to be cottonwood, and it was thick. And they let it go, and it became extremely problematic. So we can look at what has happened elsewhere and know it's not something that will just pass by.
Chairman,
Senator Landon.
My apologies, but I forgot that another piece of that conversation this morning involved the fire restoration piece as well. So that would be included in my motion, that we suggest that the chairman work with the director on those two issues for a memorandum.
Yeah, thank you for that, Senator, and I should have asked for a second. Is there a second on that proposal? Seconded by Representative Provenza. Any additional discussion regarding a letter/memo to our Appropriations Committee regarding additional funding on those two particular topics? All right, Director.
Separate them?
We can do that.
I guess I would amend the motion if it's okay with the second. We could leave it up to the chairman and the director to draft communication as necessary on those two topics.
Thank you, Senator, and it is okay with the second. That being said, all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the Game and Fish joining us this morning, and what a big set of issues we've got down in the Southwest. That's tragic what is happening at Flaming Gorge. I would think that we would want to, as a committee, recognize that particularly the boat ramp problem. I would stay focused on that. But I think maybe another communication to our governor and our appropriations committee, encouraging that we focus directly on that issue and give some help to Sweetwater County. I'm sure this may come up at our Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee meeting the first part of September. Maybe that committee could join this select committee in suggesting that we help Flaming Gorge. So I would think that maybe another communication of that sort, that would be my motion.
Is there a second? Seconded by Provenza. Any discussion? Representative Provenza.
Thank you. One of the things I think I'd like to understand better about this is, comparisons were made to the state of Utah about the infrastructure that's going on there. And I'd like to understand how they're funding that. Because maybe it's their trust, but also what role is their county able to play, or their state, or what have they done to solve that issue down there that we haven't done in making recommendations as to what this body does with that information.
I think that's a good point. I was having the same thoughts running through my mind. It sure would be helpful to have a memo to us explaining that, because there's a model there that maybe we could use if it's available to us. And I'm all in favor of asking appropriations for help. I do think the other option possibly would be we could probably add some sort of general appropriation into our large project bill, which we're going to have to ask LSO to sponsor here in a minute. That is probably another option. I'm not sure what I think about that. It's an option. I hesitate to get in the business of adding anything into those large project bills because they are fully vetted. I know this particular project has been talked about and probably vetted by the board, so that is a potential. But you get on a slippery slope when we start adding general appropriations into those, in addition to those approved by the board. And it always makes me a little bit nervous because we get a lot more questions, and then you open up those bills for a lot more discussion when really the projects have been vetted as fully as possible. So I think I'm not sure I would suggest that today. If at the last minute during session, that's always an option. And we could talk about that then. I'm a little hesitant to do that right now, but I guess I'd like to hear from the committee, their thoughts on that. Representative Provenza.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't think I would support the legislature coming in to put our own amendments onto the large project bill. I think this works the way that it does and so well because we have people that are on the ground doing the work, having the conversations, and it's not a political process. We start talking about projects that we want in our community, you're going to have 62 of those amendments in the House, and you're going to have 31 of them in the Senate. And I think that degrades the integrity of what we've built here, which is really one of the most incredible things that exists across the country. So even if it were a project in my community, I would say there's no way I can support that because I think we need to uphold the integrity of what we've built here.
Thank you, Senator.
Just really well spoken by both of you. I agree wholeheartedly. I think we've got to be really careful on both of our trusts. To, to be careful, I don't like the idea of a mission creep where we start loading more and more things on top of a couple of really good working boards. This is a pretty specific issue at a specific recreation spot in Wyoming, and it does touch this select committee, and it's going to touch the Recreation and Wildlife Committee. But I think we've got to be really careful that we keep things separated out. And so that's why the motion that we're talking about, for me anyway, was let's get right to the point that was made by our game and fish partners. We got a boat ramp problem, and maybe that is something, the governor might be able to see an angle that we don't have. He's got B11 capability. He's got the ability to maybe help the game and fish department in the meantime. But yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I think we need to be a little bit careful here. So
one other comment, and I think we're all on the same board there, or on the same, on the same ship there. But one thing I would note, and maybe this is something we talk about for next interim, is seems like a great topic for TRW committee, and really do a bigger dive into it and get our federal partners here, along with representatives of our congressional delegation, and sort it out with everybody involved, instead of us trying to solve it on our own. I know we've done that in those of us on Ag Committee. We meet regularly with the Forest Service and the BLM, and we have updated briefings from them every single interim, and it's super helpful, and it gives us that opportunity. So, and I know you do too, Mr. Chairman, but maybe just to have a specific topic going forward, I think that might be a good idea, so that we can really wrap our heads around it. Go ahead, Senator.
well, I think just to expound a little bit more on what I tried to state, probably not very well, with regard to our reservoirs, et cetera. If you go to Yellowtail or Boysen or Keyhole or Flaming Gorge or Alcova or Glendo, we have repeatedly run up against this interagency jurisdictional stuff, where you try to get something done and the county or the state says, well, that's up to the feds. You go to the feds says, well, no, that's up to your county. It is a difficult issue, and I think that is something that maybe TRW could tackle and see if we couldn't work with our three, whoever that is. We don't know who that'll be until a few weeks from now. But yeah, I think that would be helpful to the state of Wyoming. We've seen what it did at Boysen, and I think it's paid off over there. Whether we could transfer anything or at least give jurisdictional authority to the state, I think we could gain some really good ground.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, could you restate what the motion is and what we're considering, just for my own clarity?
Thank you, Representative.
Thank
Senator
you for
Landa.
that. I think the motion was simply to ask the chairman to send a communication to the governor and to our appropriations partners with regard to the ask from the Game and Fish Department on Flaming Gorge, specific to the boat ramp problem.
Representative.
I'm just thinking out loud here. Forgive me, Chairman. It strikes me that this is slightly different than the last motion where we're talking about invasives and the natural resources that we're trying to preserve, right? And this is a man-made body of water that we're talking about boat ramps for recreation's sake, which, I'm unclear in terms of exactly what our role is in that. I think a motion like this to me would make a lot more sense coming from the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee. I also think that gives directive to the folks that are looking at the boat ramp to bring some clarity to the conversation, if that's what we want to look at. I don't know I know I seconded the motion for discussion. I don't know that it makes a ton of sense as a letter coming from this committee.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Senator.
Chairman, I respect that, and I think that's well stated too. I think maybe it was more in my mind just an acknowledgement that this select committee understands the depth of the problem. We can certainly take that up in September at our Travel and Wildlife Committee, and I'll make sure that that comes up. Perhaps some of our game and fish folks might be at that meeting in Jackson. So either way, I think my purpose in the motion was to maybe make sure that the chairman gets something to the governor at least to say, look, we've got an issue. Maybe you're aware of it, but this came to our committee on the legislative front. We're concerned about it. Maybe we just rely on our game and fish guys to do that for us, but that was our chance to just say, hey, the select committee heard this issue. We wanted to make sure people knew about it.
I would also know, I mean, I think the nexus is the Outdoor Recreation Trust, right? And so, you know, I think this is an issue that's important to them. This is now their home committee. They come here, ask us to approve their work. That's what the statute requires them to do. And so I think that's, you know, that can be the nexus. So I don't have a problem. But it's, you know, it's the committee's will. It's going to happen in TRW for sure. I'm pretty sure the chairman will take care of that. So if it doesn't happen here today, I don't think that's the end of the world, that it will happen in a couple of weeks. So whatever the committee's will is, but I do think there is you know, enough of a nexus for us to write that letter. We do have some stake in that because as we heard from Mr. Riemann, this is a project that they think is important, might be a little bit too large for them to take on. And it definitely is. After we heard the additional testimony, this is a much bigger problem than a couple boat ramps. But for now, we're just going to deal with the boat ramps. So thank you, Representative. Good point. All right. That being said, any additional discussion on that? Question being called. All in favor of sending a letter to the governor and to the Appropriations Committee, please say aye. All those opposed? All right. That motion has been adopted as well. I think we have one other piece of work we need to I believe we need a motion to direct LSO to have a bill draft regarding the Outdoor Rec Trust Fund based on their two large projects so that we can also approve that at our December meeting. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that that LSO work with the Director of Outdoor Recreation to have a large project bill draft for our December meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by the senator. All right. Any discussion on that? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. That motion has been adopted as well. Is there any additional directives or work we need to do, committee? All right. It's good seeing you all here. Thanks for being with us. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Chairman.